and gentlemen, this is a very special evening. I'm sorry now that everyone can't get a seat, but we are here really to celebrate the work of Beartha Beatty. Now, Beartha Beatty lived here in County Kerry for a period of time back at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century. She left around in the early part of the 20th century. She was a remarkable woman in her own way, and the speakers that we have here this evening will refer to her career. She was the daughter of Francis Gray, who made a huge contribution to this town and unfortunately is forgotten about. And her mother was the Corsi from Duncaha, the Crays came from Commons, and I'm delighted to see the Hanlons who live in the Corsi's house here this evening with us, and also the Carmodys who live actually in the Crays house, who both families are here with us this evening, and the houses are more exactly as they were back then. This book was edited by Padraig de Broom. Padraig is not here this evening. Padraig doesn't really like occasions like this, but could I say that Padraig de Broom has made a major contribution to the Stole since he came here to retire, and really he hasn't retired here, but he's been responsible for a number of really very important publications, and I'm sure there's a lot more to come. And I would like just to acknowledge the work that Padraig did on this book, which you shall see. Padraig some years ago acquired a copy of Kerry Memories. It was owned by Maurice McKenna, and Padraig was to some extent carried away by the footnotes that Maurice McKenna made on that particular book, which he still has. So he thought it was a good idea to publish the book, republish the book, to include the footnotes, and also to include an introduction from him to expand further on the subjects and the themes that were in the book, and also some of the commentary by Maurice McKenna. So really here you have an introduction by Padraig de Broom, which is in a way a history of North Kerry, a history of the Stole. You have the comments by Maurice McKenna on the various issues raised by Beartha Beatty, and you have Beartha Beatty's book itself, which are memories here of living in the Stole and also other parts of Kerry like Glenveigh, Ballyhyde, Ballybunion, Tralee, Killarney, and other parts of Kerry. And it's really a fascinating book. Very well written by Beartha Beatty and very well commented on by Maurice McKenna. And it's really, I suppose, academic, I suppose, in a way, introduction by Padraig de Broom. So, ladies and gentlemen, the first speaker we have here tonight, you all know him. He's just a young fella yet, at 89. But I suppose he remembers this time in the Stole, this time of the Stole, more than anybody else. He's probably one of the oldest around here now, apart from Tita Hearn, who's 93, still going strong, and Dan Keane, who's 88. But Jack is one of the oldest citizens in this town. He has a fantastic memory. You know, he's made a great contribution to this town and still making a great contribution to the town. So I would like to introduce you now, Jack McKenna. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. The first thing I'd like to do is to ask you, can you hear me all right? All right? Okay. The head is getting very bad, so I have to have notes here. But it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here to the launch of Beartha Beatty, Nee Craig's book. Actually, I should say relaunch, because as you already know, it was originally launched in 1932, I think it was. Next, I want to say a very special welcome to Beartha Beatty's descendant, Rosemary Beatty, and her family and friends who've come all the way from England to be with us on this memorable occasion. To refer back to the book, this is a kind and gentle book. It gives fascinating glimpses into the lives and the life and times of the mostly Protestant community in the Stole and district, and illustrates the influence which the culture and fashions of the Victorian era had on this society. Their horse riding, their hunting, their fishing, their food, their customs, even their French-speaking governesses. And so I feel sure that you will enjoy the flavor of those days which this book will give you. When you go into a supermarket to get something and you find on the shelf the very item you're looking for, and it's labeled 2 for the price of 1, you're very delighted, aren't you? But here we're offering you 3 for the price of 1. Apart from Beartha's book, we have these very valuable footnotes which were written by Dr. Maurice McKenna in his copy of Beartha's book. And these have been very justifiably put into the book as they give you extra insights into the habits and customs of the people in the Stole at that time. The workers on this were also helped to a large extent by another McKenna descendant, that is Elizabeth O'Reilly, who's here beside me. She did a lot of work digging into the family archives and produced a lot of help in the production of this book. You might be interested to know, and you probably to recall anyway, that the Dr. Maurice McKenna that I just mentioned was a true descendant of the original man called William Fitz-Elliot. Fitz-Elliot is the Norse word for Fitz, of course, is the word for a son. So it gradually became Gaelicized the name into McKenna. And the reason I mention this is it shows the connection with the history of the Stone. Fitz-Elliot was the man that built the castle, whose remains are still here and have incidentally been so beautifully done up in recent times. It was he that built the castle, and that was where the Stole began. There was nothing here before that almost. Above all these things, there is the triumph of the publication of the introduction by Padre de Brun. I'm sorry he's not here tonight because he deserves our accolade. This is a brilliant, scholarly and valuable work of research into the history of the Cray and the DeCourcy families, and of other notable families of North Kerry with which they were associated. This undoubtedly was only achieved by long and arduous study and of delving into a multitude of sources. His work is another milestone event in the history of the Stone, the literary capital of Ireland. My friends, it is perfectly clear that we would not be here tonight only for the Herculean efforts of Jimmy Dean and his team. Jimmy was the inspiration that brought life to this publication. It is not usual for a football fullback to score goals. But this achievement was one of the many winning goals scored by Jim for North Kerry, and we owe him a big debt of gratitude. Finally, I myself will add 3 footnotes to this publication. They're not in print, so remember them. Firstly, the book mentions the French-speaking governesses. My mother told me a story that's relevant to this. When she was about 10 years of age, my aunt, May McKenna, used to bring her for walks. Now, May was about 20 at that time, and she had been to a finishing school in France, so she could speak fluent French. And when they were coming through the square, they were nearly always joined by the girls of the O'Rahilly family, who lived in the square at that time, who were known to be vultures for culture. And they joined always with me, and from there on they spoke nothing but French. My mother, of course, had no clue what was going on. The second footnote I have, yes, it refers to the fact that Beartha, the book refers to the fact that Beartha's family, her sister, died of typhoid fever, and her father also contracted the disease. And it's just a bit of my family history that seems to indicate the cause of it. In 1912, my father bought from John Enright his business, and it comprised a builder's provider's yard and a creamery. Now, my father knew nothing about butter making, and they were having big problems producing the butter. In fact, he told me that he was frightened by the number of pichots that the creamery workers were using to try and get the butter to make. He, being a practical man, decided that he would seek proper help. And he found a professor of dairy science in Cork. And he also had his own creamery. So he said, here's a man with the theoretical knowledge and the practical knowledge. And he got him to come down to the store. He was able to correct the problems, and it was mostly that the machinery was so old and old-fashioned and worn away that was mainly the answer. But there was one thing he did. He took samples of the water of the stone, and he took them back to Cork. And sometime later he phoned my father, spoke to my father anyway, and he said to him, do you ever have outbreaks of fever in the stone? And my father said, yes, you know, we do occasionally have it from time to time. And he said, I'm not surprised because those samples of water contained very high concentration of bacteria. So that might explain this tragic event in the Gray family. Now, there's one correction I want to make. The announcement of this lecture described me as a historian. That I can't claim that yet, I must say. But I have a wife that is she is a historian. She has studied it, she got a certificate from Cork University, and so on, and works very, very hard at her knowledge and developing her knowledge of the stone and its affairs. So I think that's the historian. Well, my third footnote, I really forgot. I was just telling Rosemary that I lived in the house where the Crays lived before they moved into the castle house. When they moved, a man called Henry J. Marshall, a solicitor like Francis Cray, he bought the house. And he lived there until he died in 1939. And my father bought the house, so we moved into it. And I lived there until 1950 when I got married. But it wasn't a great house, and the front 2 rooms were good. At the ground floor there was a good sitting room and a good dining room, and upstairs there were 2 good bedrooms. But the rest of the accommodation was very bad, and the kitchen was a dreadful little hole. And So, oh yes, the house then it had rising down and a lot of other problems. So my father had to spend an awful lot of money in updating the house. He added on quite a lot to the building, and so it didn't be comfortable for us. Oh yes, it was a very cold house too. I remember I was always looking for the open fire to warm up the old bones. Now, so when Jimmy is opening one of these events, he always has a tape in front of him to cut. Now I have plenty tape to cut tonight, so instead to officially launch this book of Beartha Beatty's, the Kerry Memories, instead of cutting the tape, I'm going to cut my speech.
A lot of people that remember Jack McKenna remember him from the time he used to cycle around the stall with no hands on the handle. That's the first time I saw him. And he continued to do that right up to recently. I hope the mic is working better now. Actually, the joke about the priest was, when he came up to the mic and there was something wrong with it, he said, "There's something wrong with this mic," and the audience said, "and also with you following." Just to get it right. Now, apart from Rosemary Beatty here tonight, who is the granddaughter of Beartha Beatty, Beartha Beatty's daughter was Edith, and Rosemary is the daughter of Edith. There are two more grandsons of Beartha Beatty here tonight as well. There is Simon Watton and Robin Watton, and they're both over here. Maybe they'd stand up and acknowledge their presence. And also two local relatives of Beartha Beatty. They're from Dingle. They're Celeste and Rosemary O'Keefe, Celeste Sly and Rosemary Cotter. They're over here in front as well. Now, our next speaker is Liz O'Reilly. Liz's uncle that did a commentary on the book originally, and that's what influenced Padraig de Broom to have it republished. So I'll hand you over now to Liz O'Reilly and Mount Rivers.
It's lovely to be here this evening. In fact, John Pierce, I'd say I've really tried his patience over the last couple of years as this book was being researched, and I would like to say it's all worth it. Now, I've only just drawn a few little stories together about my great-uncle Morris, rather from a more humorous and human aspect, because obviously that does shine through in the book, but at the same time we have a few little stories in the family. I was a small girl at the time. He had come to live here. I was living in England with my mum and dad. And at that time, great-uncle Morris and Aunt Daisy were enjoying the autumn of their lives. And they were looked after by my lovely Aunt Helen, who was both gentle and humorous. I think she needed her sense of humour. And also a very nice lady called Nellie Morris. They were quite elderly at this point and somewhat infirm. So Nellie looked after the more practical needs of their health. Helen had given up her young career as a dress designer in London because she got the beck from Uncle Morris and Aunt Daisy that they'd like to return to Listor to spend their last years. So she came back. Maybe she would have become a Stella McCartney or somebody like that. I don't know. But either way, we can dream a little bit. But she did it with great style and great heart. Uncle Morris found himself an abiding hobby in growing tobacco, and he commandeered the vegetable garden at the back of the house, and he'd go off there in all weathers and he would nurture his beloved tobacco plants. He'd then harvest them, and they were brought into the kitchen and put on the air. We have a similar air still in Mount Rivers actually, and they were allowed to dry. And of course, as they dried, the smell became a little bit more pungent, and he finally would grind them up, and we'd abandon ship because the smell was something dreadful, but he loved it. I suppose he really couldn't admit that it was ghastly, but either way. I don't know if he supplied anybody else with it, but either way, he thoroughly enjoyed the hobby of his tobacco. And he was quite a religious man, in actual fact. He travelled to his daily mass on a bike, and Madeline, my cousin, is here visiting from England, and she reminded me of that fact, because I didn't know he actually cycled into mass every day. But in that, I think he had expected that, as the man, that he would probably outlive his wife Daisy. But she actually took to the bed on one occasion, and he felt he could say a few prayers, and these were the prayers for the dead and dying. He was anticipating things a little bit. And the poor woman was there with her eyes closed, and apparently there was a slight stop in the whole proceedings. She opened her eyes and she said to him, "Am I dead yet, dear?" Now, I couldn't witness that myself, but Helen told me that story. And like that, you know, when you're starting to think about somebody, you remember various aspects of them, possibly more than you might have thought you did. Doc, my mum, was genuinely fond of Uncle Morris and Aunt Daisy, and I'm reeling back the years more to the time when they were living in England in Bushy Heath. And he, as the book would describe, was very involved in different parts of his life with the army. He was definitely a loyal soldier, and he wanted to be involved in whatever conflict was on. And he couldn't, obviously, at the age he was when he was in Bushy Heath. So he joined the Home Guard, as you know, Dad's army. And he'd go off in the evening, happy as the day was long, cocoa and sandwiches. The two girls left totally unprotected. And he'd come back then the next morning, having staved off doodlebugs and all sorts of horrible manna from heaven that were going to be thrown down on the people of Bushy Heath. And my mother and Aunt Daisy ignored all sirens, went to bed, no problem, slept like two angels. But he definitely had great integrity, and he also came back to Mount Rivers with his mug and his metal plate that he'd had in the army. And he insisted on having all meals on these. I do remember that, because I was slightly askance at that, I thought, gosh, that's a bit raw. And if he didn't get his own way, he threatened to go and live at one of the arches under the bridge. And he really meant, and I thought this was fantastic, he was being very naughty, as a child would think, my gosh, he's very naughty. But he was a lovely man, a great friend of Dr. Johnny Walsh. He was called up and see him quite frequently. The two men would put their legs up on the mantelpiece in a roaring fire and obviously talk about things medical, and both enjoyed each other's company. But my final comment is there's a reference in the book to Lily Dillon, who was a lady flyer, an aviationist. And her sister, youngest sister, Naomi, was my mother's best friend and my godmother. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Now, some years ago, when Patrick thought about doing this first, he was in contact with Frida Beatty, who was Beartha Beatty's daughter. But the book has gone on, I think, maybe about 6 years now. So Frida, at this stage, is in a nursing home in Bristol, so she couldn't make it. But back then, Rosemary Beatty, her niece and Beartha Beatty's granddaughter, was very supportive and helpful of her, and she was going to come with her. So it's a pity that Frida could not be here this evening. But Rosemary actually was here before in the stall, and she was very fortunate to have met Brian McMahon back then. And she has in her possession a wonderful letter that Brian wrote to her subsequent to her visit at that particular time. No doubt she'll refer to that afterwards. So I would like now to hand you over to Rosemary Beatty.
I only saw this book for the first time yesterday, so I haven't managed to read all of Podrick's introduction, and I may be going to repeat some things that are there. I am representing my aunt, Frida. I wanted to fill in a bit the story of Beartha after the end of the book, so that you know what happened to her after that. She was here and lived a very sheltered life, really, in that she never went away to school, she was educated at home. And then she and two of her sisters, Edith and Frances, were sent to Germany to study. And that must have been a bit of a culture shock. Go to a completely strange country, with a completely strange language, but anyway. Beartha studied music and her sisters art. She then worked as a companion governess to a family in Dusseldorf. And after that she came back to England, where she did the same work for a family near Swindon in Wiltshire in England. She there met Dr. Robert Beatty at a dance, and they married in 1911. She had 5 children in 7 years. Nora, who coincidentally married a de Courcy, a different family from Beartha's grandparents. Beartha, who sadly died in June of this year, aged 92, she didn't marry. David Craig Beatty, who became a commander in the Royal Navy. Edith, our mother, and Frida Frances, the only surviving one. She was 87 last week. I've just written a few things that occurred to me. One was names. Beartha, she says in the book, sometimes known as Bertie. She married Robert, who apparently was known as Bertie. So they were Bertie and Beartha Beatty. Beartha's father was Francis, and she and Beartha's mother Ellen called one of their sons Francis and one of their daughters Frances. That must have been a bit confusing in the family. You've stolen my thunder, because part of what I was going to say was that in 1990 I brought over my mother Edith to Ireland. She'd never been to Ireland before. And we visited Tralee, Ballyhaig Castle, Listowel, Ballybunion and Talbot, as well as other places around the south west. And we met with Brian McMahon in the Listowel Arms, where he spent 3 hours talking about our history. I can show you later. He wrote me a long letter, which is almost indecipherable. I started to try and write it into my indecipherable writing this afternoon, but I didn't have time to finish it. You're welcome to come and have a look. I'm so glad that I did that in 1990, as our mother had never been to Ireland, and 2 years later she had a stroke and died the year after. I've just written a few coincidences as well. Beartha's older brother, John, was born on October the 18th. My youngest son's birthday was born on October the 18th. Beartha herself was born on November the 24th. My oldest granddaughter's birthday is on that day. Ellen and Frances had 10 children in 14 years, several only about a year apart. Beartha had 5 children in 7 years, 3 of them only just over a year apart. Perhaps it's quite a good thing that all of those children didn't have to go on producing at that rate. There might be quite a lot of us. Lancelot had a daughter, Diana, but I don't, and this is, I may be wrong. I don't know of any of the others having children. We did know Beartha's sister, Edith. She went to live in England fairly near the weekend, and I do remember her. But other than that, the family seems to have gone from this area, which is about sad. Sadly, Beartha herself died when I was only 3, and Simon was 1, and I have no memory of her. I've learnt more about her in this last week than I ever knew before. Some from our Aunt Frida, and some from Podrick's introduction. What a lot of work he did. see what effort he's put in, and we thank him so much. Beartha says in her preface, "May my grandchildren not find my memories or me too dull. I wish I'd known her." We've been given such a lovely welcome here, and we do thank everyone, and it's lovely to be here. I'd like to read one or two little bits from Kerry Memories. I have the original copy that she gave to her daughter Frida, which I borrowed for this occasion. Just a little bit, which you'll see in the book, but I'll leave it to let your appetite. She says, "When I was 6, my father purchased a larger house. Only a garden and a lane were between the first home and the new one, so that it was not unfamiliar to us, and we were delighted at the prospect of moving. My father took us in turns to see the house during the time it was being got ready for us. At our new home, known as the castle, there were numerous stables, a coach house, and all such buildings. In fact, it was a country house. There was plenty of room for pets of all sorts. They seem to have had 10 children, each with several pets. When we went to stay at Ballybunion, which we did every year, it was generally in September. We rented a house, and the entire household went. A dray took luggage, which included a piano. Later we drove in a wagonette and pair, with servants and governesses. My father and mother came by train to find everything ready. We used to take our 2 fox terriers, and one year, when we rented the rectory, one of them came into the church during service. One cow, known as the Blue Cow, was also driven on holiday. On one occasion, she didn't like it, evidently, and was found next morning outside her own field at home, having walked back by herself 9 miles. I'm just going to read the last paragraph. This is the end of the book. The charm of Kerry is too wonderful to put in writing. Come and see the mountains. Hear the soft voices of the people. Good morning kindly is their greeting. Goodbye now and good luck to you is their adieu. Surely Ireland, the Green Isle, the Isle of Saints, will someday again be the peaceful land it was, and God will save Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for huge attendance here this evening. One of the largest I've seen in here since the centre was opened. And just to remind you again, this is a North Kerry Literary Trust production. The co-founder was Joe Murphy, who's down there at the back. He was there. And it probably was the instigator of the centre, and also a number of various documentaries that we produced for RT, and a book on Modest Welsh's poems, and this particular book here. The next book we're doing actually is by a local man called John Lyons from Meanagahan in Causeway, and that will be out around Christmas time. Tonight was a very special evening for the Beatty family, and I would hope now that you will keep contact with the store. This is where you're from, your root is here, and hopefully that you will maintain and retain this very, very important connection. For the rest of you, thank you for your attention. It's been a wonderful evening. Just to tell you that this book is a special edition, so I would advise you to buy it now because there are not too many of them left. It will be an ideal Christmas present, and whatever profit we make will go back into producing other books on North Kerry, so that's very important. Just finally, Padraig just mentioned to me that I should thank just a few people in particular. One already has been mentioned, John Pearce. John has put an extraordinary amount of work into this book as well. If you look at the acknowledgements actually at the beginning, you'll see all the people that helped Padraig. Also Vincent Connolly, Tim Griffin, local historians were very helpful too. In Dublin, Frank Carroll, who went into the libraries and so on for him, and many more, but they're all mentioned in the acknowledgement. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was a wonderful evening, a special evening for this town. I would like to thank again Jack McKenna for doing the superb launch. Liz O'Reilly, and especially for Rosemary, who travelled long distance from Orion in the English Channel.
Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, Atlantic Ocean. Only 70 people lives in our island, which incidentally she leases her piece off of the great Prince Charles, so that's a major connection for this story. And just Cara told me one thing, that before you go, the launch of the traditional music weekend is on here at the same time next Friday evening. So thank you all very much.